Most people think of their home as a safe place, a space where you can lock the door, kick off your shoes, and know that nobody has the right to step onto your property without permission. At least, that's what I believed until my neighbor proved me wrong. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, an entitled, controlling, nosy neighbor who thought the entire neighborhood was hers to rule. And when she started trespassing on my property, not once, not twice, but over and over again, I realized I had to take action. I set up hidden cameras, not knowing what I would find. But when the truth was finally revealed, what I caught on tape shocked the entire neighborhood and changed the way everyone saw her forever. I moved into this neighborhood with the same hopes most people have: peace, privacy, and maybe a chance to build some friendships with my neighbors. It wasn't the fanciest community in the world, but it was well-kept, quiet, and had an HOA that, on paper, promised to keep things orderly. What I didn't realize back then was that the HOA came with a hidden tax, a woman named Karen. She wasn't officially in charge, but everyone knew she ran things from behind the scenes. She patrolled the streets like a guard dog, pointing out violations that no one cared about. Trash cans set out 15 minutes too early. She'd send a warning. Lawn not perfectly edged. She'd threaten fines. At first, I thought she was just overly dedicated. But soon, I learned she wasn't just enforcing rules. She was enforcing her own power. It started small. Karen would wander too close to my property line while inspecting the neighborhood. Then, I'd notice her leaning over my fence, peering into my backyard like she was searching for something wrong. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Ignore it and she'll stop, right? Wrong. Ignoring her only made her bolder. One afternoon, I came home early and caught her standing in my backyard. Yes, inside my yard, just staring at my garden. She didn't even look guilty. Instead, she said, "Your hedges are too high. HOA guidelines say they shouldn't block visibility." I was stunned. First of all, they didn't. Second, she had no right to step foot onto my land. I told her firmly, "Please stay off my property. You're trespassing." She rolled her eyes, muttered something about doing my job, and walked away like she owned the place. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Within days, things started happening. My fence had a mysterious crack. The gate to my backyard was found wide open twice, letting my dog escape and wander down the street. Decorations I had placed on my porch would be moved or even knocked over. At first, I thought maybe it was kids or just bad luck. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was her, and she was daring me to prove it. I felt trapped in my own home. Every time I left for work, I worried about what I'd come back to. Every time I heard a sound at night, I wondered if Karen was lurking around again. It was beyond frustrating. It was invasive. I knew I needed evidence. Without proof, she'd just deny everything. And people in the neighborhood? They were too afraid of her to speak up. So I came up with a plan. I spent hours online researching hidden cameras. I didn't want anything obvious, because I knew if Karen spotted them, she'd just avoid them, or worse, destroy them. Eventually, I found exactly what I needed. 2 small cameras disguised as solar garden lights. Perfect. Nobody would even think to question them. I ordered them immediately and installed them the day they arrived. One went near the front gate, facing the walkway. The other I placed in the backyard, angled toward the patio and garden. From then on, every time I stepped outside, I felt a mix of tension and excitement. I was nervous about what I might find, but more than anything, I was desperate for the truth. The cameras were motion activated, sending clips directly to my phone. That first night, I sat in bed, scrolling through the footage, waiting for something. Nothing happened. The second night, still nothing. But by the third day, I struck gold. There she was. Karen, strolling right into my yard as casually as if she lived there. She didn't knock, didn't call, just walked right in. She leaned down, picked up one of my solar lights, inspected it, then tossed it back onto the ground like it was trash. I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding as I replayed the clip over and over. Finally, I had proof. But little did I know, that was only the beginning. Because what the cameras caught next would go far beyond a nosy neighbor. It would expose just how far Karen was willing to go. The footage from that third day was only the start. Over the next 2 weeks, the cameras captured more than I could have ever imagined. At first, it was little things. Karen walking straight through my yard in the middle of the afternoon, pretending to inspect my property. Sometimes she would pick up small decorations I'd put out, like a garden gnome or a wind chime, look at them with this judgmental expression, and then put them back in the wrong spot, almost as if she wanted me to know she'd been there. But then things escalated. One morning, the footage showed her pulling my patio chair across the yard and dragging it to the fence. She actually stood on it so she could peer into my neighbor's yard, like some kind of self-appointed spy. The audacity made my blood boil. She wasn't just violating my privacy. She was using my property as her surveillance station. Then came the night footage. Around 9:30 p.m., the camera by the back gate picked her up again. This time, she wasn't just snooping. She was ripping flowers out of the planter boxes I had carefully arranged. Petunias, marigolds, even the little herbs I had growing, all yanked out and thrown to the side like weeds. When I saw that clip, I had to pause. I sat there in shock, my fists clenched, my teeth grinding. Who does that? Who sneaks into someone's backyard at night just to destroy plants? It wasn't about rules anymore. It wasn't about the HOA. It was personal. Karen was sending a message. She could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. Every time I saw her on the street, smiling that smug little smile, every time she waved at other neighbors as if she was the pillar of the community, I wanted to scream. But I held it in. I kept gathering footage, clip after clip. Her moving my outdoor lights, her trying to open the side door of my shed, her stomping across my lawn with muddy shoes after a rainstorm, leaving deep prints just to ruin the grass. The more evidence I collected, the clearer it became. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a campaign of harassment, and I had everything I needed to prove it. Woman in black t-shirt and blue jeans. The cameras were motion activated, sending clips directly to my phone. That first night, I sat in bed, scrolling through the footage, waiting for something. Nothing happened. The second night, still nothing. But by the third day, I struck gold. There she was, Karen, strolling right into my yard as casually as if she lived there. She didn't knock, didn't call, just walked right in. She leaned down, picked up one of my solar lights, inspected it, then tossed it back onto the ground like it was trash. I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding as I replayed the clip over and over. Finally, I had proof. But little did I know, that was only the beginning. Because what the cameras caught next would go far beyond a nosy neighbor. It would expose just how far Karen was willing to go. I knew the moment was coming. I couldn't just sit on this footage forever. But if I was going to confront her, I wanted to do it on my terms, not hers. So I came up with a plan. I sent her a message, casually saying that I wanted to discuss an HOA matter, and asked if she could stop by. She agreed, probably thinking she was about to lecture me about some imaginary violation. She walked into my living room with her usual air of superiority, clutching a little clipboard, like she was the queen of the neighborhood conducting an inspection. She sat down across from me, adjusted her glasses, and said, "So, what seems to be the issue?" I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and without a word pressed play. The video clip popped up on the screen. There she was, clear as day, walking through my backyard, yanking flowers out of the ground. Her smile vanished instantly. She froze, her mouth slightly open, her eyes flicking between me and the footage. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the video roll. Next clip, her dragging my patio chair. Next clip, her moving my decorations. Clip after clip, trespassing after trespassing, all caught in high definition. Finally, I looked up and said, "Care to explain this?" At first, she stayed quiet. Then the excuses started tumbling out. I was checking for HOA violations. The rules allow me to inspect properties. Your decorations were out of compliance. Each excuse sounded weaker than the last. I cut her off and told her flatly, "The HOA doesn't give you the right to break into my yard, damage my property, or spy on my neighbors. What you've been doing is illegal." She sputtered, trying to regain control of the conversation, but the more she spoke, the guiltier she looked. She finally stood up, red-faced, muttering that she was just trying to maintain standards. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that I had already saved every clip, and if she ever stepped foot on my property again, I wouldn't hesitate to press charges. She stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind her. But I wasn't finished. I knew she would try to spin this, to twist the story and make herself look like the victim. That's exactly why I sent copies of the footage straight to the HOA board. I attached a long, detailed email outlining everything she had done, complete with dates, times, and descriptions from the camera logs. There was no denying it now. Karen had been caught, and her reign over the neighborhood was about to collapse. When I sent the footage to the HOA board, I half expected them to brush it off. After all, Karen had been running the place like her personal kingdom for years. But once they saw the evidence, even they couldn't protect her. The next meeting was tense. Neighbors sat in folding chairs, whispering, curious about why such an urgent session had been called. The board members played the footage for everyone to see. Clip after clip of Karen trespassing, stealing, destroying. Gasps filled the room. People who had once been afraid of her were now openly shaking their heads, whispering things like, "I knew she was trouble." And, "So it really was her." Karen sat in the back, arms crossed, her face turning redder with every passing second. When the final clip ended, there was silence. Then, for the first time, the HOA board admitted she had crossed a line. They announced that she was being stripped of her so-called authority. She had no right to enter anyone's property again, and if she did, the police would be contacted immediately. Speaking of police, I had already made a report. The officer who took my statement said the footage was more than enough for trespassing and vandalism charges. A citation was issued, and Karen had to pay fines out of her own pocket. The queen of the neighborhood had finally been dethroned. The change in the community was immediate. For years, people had tiptoed around Karen, worried about her wrath. But now, she was powerless. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact with me started stopping by to chat. One even confessed that Karen had entered their yard once, too, but they had been too scared to say anything. My cameras hadn't just protected me. They had given the entire neighborhood the courage to stand up. These days, Karen still lives down the street, but she's a shadow of her former self. No more clipboard patrols, no more barging into people's yards, no more lectures about lawn height or mailbox colors. If she sees me, she quickly looks away. She knows better now. And while she never apologized, I don't need her apology. What I needed was peace, and finally, I have it. Looking back, I learned something important. Sometimes people like Karen thrive on intimidation. They count on fear and silence to keep their power. But the moment you shine a light on the truth, whether it's with hidden cameras or simply refusing to be bullied, that power crumbles. My home is my sanctuary again, My yard, my garden, my peace of mind, all restored. And if Karen or anyone else ever tries to cross that line again, well, let's just say my cameras are still watching. Because trespassing may have been her game, but catching her was mine. Days after the HOA meeting were unlike anything I had seen before. Neighbors who used to whisper in fear of Karen suddenly found their voices. For years, she had intimidated everyone, sending nasty notes about lawn decorations, threatening fines for leaving cars parked on the street, and even scolding kids for riding their bikes too fast. But with the footage out in the open, people realized she had no authority, just arrogance. For the first time, the neighborhood felt lighter. Families gathered in front yards, kids played without constant scolding, and weekend barbecues popped up without Karen storming over to complain about unauthorized gatherings. One of my neighbors, an older gentleman named Mr. Harris, actually came over with tears in his eyes. He told me that Karen had entered his backyard once while he was at church, claiming she was checking for safety hazards. She left his garden gate open, and his cat ran away for 3 days before finally returning. He never said anything back then, but when he saw my footage, he felt vindicated. Another neighbor admitted she had been fined over $200 for unapproved holiday decorations, which Karen had personally removed from her porch. Everyone had their own story, and slowly, they all came forward. Karen's mask of control was gone, replaced by the truth we had all endured in silence. The police report I filed didn't just sit in a drawer. An officer actually came to my home, reviewed the footage again, and confirmed what I already knew. Karen wasn't just being nosy. She was breaking the law. Trespassing, vandalism, harassment. The officer explained that while jail time was unlikely for first-time misdemeanors, the fines and legal record would sting. And more importantly, she now had an official warning. If she ever tried to step foot on my property again, she could face much harsher consequences. Knowing that gave me peace of mind I hadn't felt in months. When word spread that the police had cited her, the shift in power was undeniable. Karen, once so loud and commanding, was suddenly quiet. She stopped attending HOA meetings, stopped marching around with her clipboard, and started keeping her blinds closed more often. It was almost surreal. The woman who had lived to control everyone else's lives was now living in her own self-imposed isolation. As weeks passed, I had time to reflect on everything that happened. What struck me most was how fear had kept us all silent for so long. Karen wasn't physically intimidating. She wasn't powerful in any real sense. But she used rules, shame, and persistence like weapons. And because nobody wanted to deal with conflict, we let her. That's the danger of people like her. They don't need real power if they can convince you that they already have it. But the moment you challenge them with truth, with evidence, with courage, their whole act collapses. My hidden cameras taught me more than how to catch a trespasser. They taught me that sometimes you need to defend your peace with tools, with preparation, with strategy. And they reminded me that silence only feeds bullies. If I had never set up those cameras, Karen would still be roaming my yard today, still pulling up my flowers, still acting untouchable. Instead, she's been exposed, and I've reclaimed my home. As weeks passed, I had time to reflect on everything that happened. What struck me most was how fear had kept us all silent for so long. Karen wasn't physically intimidating. She wasn't powerful in any real sense. But she used rules, shame, and persistence like weapons. And because nobody wanted to deal with conflict, we let her. That's the danger of people like her. They don't need real power if they can convince you that they already have it. But the moment you challenge them with truth, with evidence, with courage, their whole act collapses. My hidden cameras taught me more than how to catch a trespasser. They taught me that sometimes you need to defend your peace with tools, with preparation, with strategy. And they reminded me that silence only feeds bullies. If I had never set up those cameras, Karen would still be roaming my yard today, still pulling up my flowers, still acting untouchable. Instead, she's been exposed, and I've reclaimed my home.